She lay in a snowdrift, shielding her little ones from the relentless cold. Suddenly, headlights pierced the darkness, accompanied by coarse voices drawing near. One man raised his foot. Pain shot through her body. What happened next? Salvation or doom? Night had fallen over the city like a black velvet cloak, concealing everything beneath its heavy shroud. The icy wind howled between the abandoned buildings, piercing through every crack and crevice as if trying to reach the very soul. Snow fell relentlessly, covering the ground in a thick white blanket that muffled all sounds, transforming the world into a silent, lifeless wasteland. Beneath the neon glow of a street lamp, a German shepherd lay on the sidewalk's edge. Her thick fur was frozen and dirty, her face and body marred by bruises and wounds, evidence of a recent struggle. She curled into herself, trying to preserve the last remnants of warmth. Beneath her emaciated body lay her newborn puppies, tiny, helpless creatures, their small noses pressed damply against her fur, their eyes still sealed shut, oblivious to the world around them. Her eyes, once filled with life and loyalty, now reflected only pain and exhaustion. In their depths lay the raw wound of betrayal. She remembered the happy days when she had a home, a loving owner, and a warm bed. Each memory of those times was like a knife piercing her heart, a cruel reminder of all she had lost. The betrayal, an abrupt stop of the car, a sharp command, and the cold word, "stay," had shattered her world, leaving her abandoned to fate. The world around her was dead. The empty windows of the abandoned houses stared into the abyss of the night like hollow eyes, knowing neither joy nor sorrow. The wind picked up, carrying with it the scents of smoke and filth, mingled with the faint stench of decaying food. Each breath was sharp and icy, making her fur bristle against the cold. Then, the sound of approaching footsteps broke the silence. The shepherd lifted her head, her heart pounding. Headlights flickered in the darkness, casting long shadows on the snowy ground. A chill of fear crept through her body, making her limbs feel heavier. She knew that the approaching figures could bring either salvation or another cruel twist of fate. A car came to a stop, and two men stepped out. Their footsteps echoed against the desolate street, the harsh crunch of their boots shattering the night's eerie stillness. One of them eyed the dog with disdain. "Look what we have here," he growled, his voice rough and indifferent. The second man raised an eyebrow in surprise as he took in the sight of the dog and her litter. "A shepherd with puppies? Maybe we should leave them. Could they survive on their own?" Fear tightened its grip around the shepherd's chest. She knew these men could snatch away her last chance at survival. Her heart pounded so violently it felt as though it might burst. Lowering herself to the ground, she shielded her puppies with her body, trying to make herself as small and unthreatening as possible. Her breath came in ragged gasps, each exhale forming white clouds of vapor in the freezing air. The puppies continued to whimper, their cries desperate and helpless, as if pleading for the protection their mother could no longer guarantee. The shepherd knew she had to defend them at any cost, even if it meant facing death. Suddenly, one of the men raised his foot, aiming to kick her away. The impact struck her shoulder, sending a jolt of pain searing through her body. She let out a whimper, but she did not retreat. Tears shimmered in her eyes, not because dogs cry, but because pain and despair had become unbearable. "Leave them. They'll die on their own," the man shouted. With those words, the world around her darkened. Her vision blurred, and cold seeped into every fiber of her being. She felt her strength slipping away, the world dissolving into a shapeless void. The last thing she saw before losing consciousness was the glimmer of her puppies, still whimpering, still searching for warmth and safety. Her heart ached with unbearable sorrow, knowing she could no longer protect them. The world faded into nothingness, leaving only cold and emptiness. As the darkness swallowed her, her final thoughts were filled with the sting of betrayal and powerlessness. She could not believe that everything she had once known had been ripped away so cruelly and mercilessly. In the depths of her heart, a fragile ember of despair was born, one that seemed as if it would never fade. Morning remained trapped in the grip of the night's nightmares. The moon still hung high in the sky, barely piercing through the dense clouds, as if afraid to reveal the secrets of that dreadful night. The sun had yet to break the cold darkness, and the world was wrapped in an icy shroud of despair. The German shepherd slowly regained consciousness, sharp pain radiating from her shoulder, a dull ache spreading through her bruised body. She struggled to rise, ice crystals clinging to her fur like painful thorns. Her puppies still trembled from the cold and fear, their cries growing quieter yet more urgent. She knew she had to move. Hunger would not wait, nor would her maternal instincts. Weakness consumed every muscle, but the thought of her pup's survival fueled her resolve. Her heart pounded wildly, every fiber of her being attuned to the sounds of the desolate street. The world around her was lifeless. Abandoned buildings loomed with hollow windows staring into the abyss of night, like vacant eyes devoid of joy or sorrow. The wind howled, carrying the cries of lonely birds, unable to find refuge in this frozen wasteland. Snow continued to fall relentlessly, concealing tracks and swallowing sound, making every step a treacherous gamble. The shepherd crawled forward, leaving deep imprints in the pristine snow. Her paws clung to the icy surface, each step accompanied by a sharp, stabbing pain, as if needles pierced her joints. She cast wary glances around her, fear gleaming in her eyes. Any shadow could conceal danger, whether a wild beast or a man with a cruel heart. Meanwhile, her puppies writhed in the cold, their tiny noses searching for warmth they could not find. They were too weak to generate heat, too fragile to endure. The shepherd felt every shiver in their tiny bodies, as if they were tremors in her own heart. She knew time was against them, each passing moment pushing them closer to the edge of survival. Suddenly, the air filled with the scent of smoke and food, a fleeting whisper of hope, tainted by fear. She knew someone or something was nearby. Her instincts bristled with warning, and she assumed a defensive stance, ready to protect her pups. Her heartbeat quickened, blood roared in her ears, and every nerve in her body tensed for survival. Through the blizzard, movement emerged. Figures staggered forward, their steps uneven, stumbling over unseen obstacles. The glow of streetlights cut through the swirling snow, casting dazzling reflections, like the eyes of nocturnal predators. The shepherd stiffened, her body coiled like a spring, ready to attack or flee. But this time, the men were not like those from before. One of them slowed his pace, his eyes locking onto hers. There was no cruelty in his gaze, only exhaustion and something else. A quiet, unspoken plea. He lifted his hand, holding food, warm, fragrant, a lifeline that could save them. The shepherd tensed, disbelief flashing in her eyes. It was too good to be true. Her heart wavered between fear and hope. She wanted to believe this human meant no harm, but years of abandonment and betrayal had made her wary beyond measure. Her legs trembled, but the instinct to protect her young lent her courage. Slowly, cautiously, she inched forward, every fiber of her body screaming with fear. Her puppies whimpered louder, as if sensing the shift in the air. The man made no sudden moves. He simply sat, waiting, perhaps for acceptance, perhaps for rejection. The shepherd stopped just a few feet away, her breath forming white clouds in the frigid air. Her gaze flickered between the food and the man, torn between the need to shield her pups and the desperate urge to survive. The wound of betrayal lay deep in her eyes, yet a fragile thread of hope shimmered beneath it. The man extended his hand, his movements slow, deliberate, an understanding gesture, as if he knew just how fragile this moment was. She felt his warmth against the cold, a stark contrast to the biting wind. For a second, she allowed herself to believe. But the ghosts of her past did not let go so easily. She stood frozen, doubt gripping her like a vice. The wind howled once more, snow thickening around them. But something had changed. In the man's eyes, she saw no threat, only a genuine desire to help. It was a light in the endless tunnel of her suffering, a beacon calling her toward salvation. Something ancient and powerful stirred within her. A mother's instinct, stronger than fear, stronger than pain. Her heart wavered no longer. She took a step forward, then another, until she was close enough to sniff his outstretched hand. Her cold, damp nose brushed against his skin, hesitant but searching. She could feel the kindness radiating from him, seeping through the frozen barriers of her past. A single tear formed at the corner of her eye, freezing before it could fall. But for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she allowed herself to hope. With every passing second, trust took root, fragile yet real. And finally, she took the first step toward salvation. The harsh winter spared no one. Each morning began beneath the weight of the night's relentless blizzard, an unyielding sentinel guarding the lifeless streets of the city. The German shepherd slowly opened her eyes, feeling the icy crystals clinging to her fur, making every movement ache. She exhaled, gathering the last remnants of strength to continue protecting her little ones. The puppies, still so small and helpless, whimpered from the cold and hunger, their tiny paws trembling in weakness. Their cries pierced her soul, making her heart ache with unbearable worry. She knew she had to find food and shelter. If she failed, they would all perish in this frozen wasteland. With every step, her paws sank deeper into the loose snow and her body wavered under the weight of exhaustion and pain. The cold seeped into her bones, making her muscles spasm. She scanned her surroundings, searching for any sign of life in this endless winter desert. The abandoned houses loomed like silent witnesses to her suffering, their empty windows staring at her with indifference. Suddenly, a faint noise broke the silence. The shepherd's heart pounded faster. It could mean salvation or a new threat. She froze, her ears pricked, her eyes straining to see through the darkness. Footsteps drew nearer, uneven and unsteady, as if the approaching figure was weary and cold. Her instincts screamed of danger, but a mother's love clung to the hope that this time things would be different. Under the dim glow of scattered streetlights, she saw a man cautiously approaching. His movements were slow, uncertain, his hands clenched around a bundle wrapped in plastic. The scent of food reached her, an intoxicating promise of relief, tainted by fear. She knew she couldn't afford weakness. If this was a trap, her puppies would be left defenseless. The man stopped a few steps away, his gaze fixed on her with an unreadable expression. She studied his face. There was exhaustion and helplessness, but no malice. Slowly, he extended his hand, offering food. The shepherd recoiled, torn between fear and the desperate desire to believe. She noticed the slight tremble in his fingers, and for the first time in a long while, she saw a flicker of something real, a chance at trust. Inside her, a storm raged. She wanted to trust. She wanted to accept help. But years of abandonment had sharpened her caution into an unbreakable shield. Her paws trembled, but the unwavering force of motherhood pushed her forward. Step by step, she moved closer, her nose quivering as it brushed against his outstretched hand, inhaling the warmth of the food he offered. The man remained still, neither advancing nor retreating. His eyes held patience, understanding. The shepherd felt something inside her shift, and in that moment, she made a choice. Carefully, she took the food from his hand. Her lips trembled from the cold and pain, but each bite brought a flicker of strength. "Thank you," she might have whispered if he could understand the silent gratitude in her eyes. The man crouched, reaching out, his hand brushing gently over her head. The touch was unfamiliar yet soothing. She felt warmth, the first she had known in what seemed like forever. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps her suffering was nearing its end. And in that moment, an invisible bond was formed. A fragile thread of trust stretched between two beings who had both known hardship. The man extended his hand again. The shepherd, still wary, hesitated but did not withdraw. A warmth spread through her chest, pushing back the cold. But the past did not release its grip so easily. She studied him, her eyes filled with both longing and caution. This could be salvation, but it could just as easily be another test of endurance. Her soul was torn, between fear and hope, between the need to protect her young and the desperate urge to survive. A battle raged inside her, the terror of loss versus the yearning to believe in kindness once more. She knew this moment could change everything. Her entire body ached from exhaustion, but a mother's love burned brighter than pain. The man did not leave. He remained there, patient, offering neither threat nor force. His presence was quiet but steady, a reminder that perhaps kindness had not vanished entirely from the world. The shepherd slowly began to relax, allowing herself to trust. Just a little. She realized that this man might be their salvation, the long-awaited light in her dark, frozen world. Spring crept in slowly, melting away winter's harsh ice and bringing with it the first signs of new life. The thawing snow freed the city from its frozen grasp, but for the German shepherd and her puppies, it signified more than just a change in seasons. It marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. As the snow receded, it gave way to green meadows and fresh grass, swaying gently in the spring breeze, as if inviting them into a new world. Mikhail continued to care for the shepherd and her growing litter every day. The old shed, which he had transformed into a cozy shelter, now felt like a real home. Inside, it was warm and bright, filled with the scent of fresh food and cleanliness. The shepherd slowly began to adjust, feeling Mikhail's kindness seep into her weary soul. The puppies grew stronger, their fur becoming thick and glossy, their eyes wide open, taking in the world with curiosity and delight. Despite the comfort, the shepherd could not fully escape the memories of her past. Sometimes, as she sat quietly by the window, watching the sunlight dance over the ground, her mind would drift back to those freezing nights when she lay in a snowbank, shielding her babies from the cold. The pain and exhaustion still lingered in her eyes, a silent reminder of the moments when hope had felt so far away. Mikhail understood that trust could not be built overnight. Patiently, he continued to care for her, knowing that wounds took time to heal. Every evening he sat beside her, gently stroking her head and speaking softly, as if hoping to convey his kindness through touch and words. The shepherd could feel the warmth of his presence, his unwavering attention slowly thawing the ice around her heart. And yet, the shadow of betrayal remained, lingering like a ghost from the past. One evening, as the sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues of pink and orange, Mikhail approached the shepherd and sat beside her. He reached out his hand, and at last she allowed herself to trust completely. Cautiously, she placed her paw in his palm. In that moment, an unspoken bond formed between them, a connection built on trust and understanding. Tears of relief glistened in her eyes. Dogs do not cry, but in her gaze was the deepest gratitude and love. The puppies, now full of energy and mischief, ran around playing, eager to explore their surroundings. The shepherd watched them with pride and tenderness, her heart swelling with a joy she had not felt in a long time. Mikhail was no longer just their savior. He had become a friend, a guardian who had shown her that kindness still existed in this world. Yet, no matter how much had changed, the past had left its mark on her soul. On quiet, dark nights, she would lie by the door, gazing into the shadows as if waiting for the return of the one who had abandoned her. Her eyes held a complex mix of emotions: hope and fear, trust and caution. She knew she had a new home now, yet the memories of loneliness and cold would never fully fade. Mikhail understood that the past could not be erased, but he was determined to help the shepherd and her puppies move forward. He spent more time with them, playing and offering affection, proving to them that the world could be a safe and loving place. The shepherd began to feel like part of a family, though her heart still bore the scars of all she had endured. One bright spring morning, Mikhail took the shepherd and her puppies for a walk in the park. The scent of fresh grass, blooming trees, and birdsong filled the air, creating a sense of peace. The shepherd walked beside Mikhail, her steps steady, yet a flicker of hesitation remained in her eyes. The puppies, full of boundless curiosity, darted around, exploring this new world with excitement. A woman and a small child sat on a nearby bench. The woman noticed the shepherd and slowly approached, extending her hand with a piece of food. The shepherd stopped, her heartbeat quickening. Was this another betrayal waiting to happen, or a new chance at trust? She studied the woman carefully, searching for any hint of deception. The child smiled and reached out to pet one of the puppies. The shepherd's tense muscles relaxed slightly. She could feel her fear beginning to melt, replaced by a hesitant hope. Mikhail observed the moment and offered a gentle smile. He saw the change in the shepherd, the way she hesitated but did not retreat, the way she considered the offered kindness rather than rejecting it outright. She took a cautious step forward, sniffed the woman's hand, and finally accepted the food. And in that moment, she realized something. The past did not define her future. She had been abandoned, but she was not alone anymore. She had suffered, but she had also survived. Now, she had a home, a family, a second chance. As evening settled over the park, the shepherd walked home beside Mikhail and her puppies. She curled up in her warm corner, watching over her little ones as they dozed off, their tiny bodies nestled against her. For the first time in a long time, she felt something close to peace. The traces of the past would always remain, but now they were no longer chains. They were simply part of the story that had led her to where she belonged.